Hello silver friends, this is Jolie from QuickSilverHair, and today we are talking hair porosity. I know many of you have requested this video because of my ultimate guide and because of the times that I have mentioned it briefly in other videos and blog posts. I have an ultimate guide blog post that I did on porosity, and it took me months to put that post together, so I was a little nervous and apprehensive to do a video on porosity because I want to get it right. I don't want to contribute to myths that are already out there, and I want to make sure it's not confusing and that you understand all of the aspects of porosity and what it means for your hair type. So I originally was going to do one video with all of this, but it was way too much information. It took me a couple of weeks to put all this together. So I decided to split this into 4 videos, and this is the first one. It'll be on all the details, all the definitions, how to figure out your porosity. The following 3 videos will be hair care tips for low, medium, and high porosity. You will each get a dedicated video to your hair type. This is not the be-all, end-all subject for hair type, so keep that in mind. You want to head over to my hair type blog post, I'll link it here, and make sure that you fully understand all the layers of your hair type. Porosity is just one aspect of your hair care. In silver hair, porosity comes into play with your conditioning products and your hold products. This will be where you're going to want to pay attention to what you're using for your hair porosity and to protect your hair porosity. And remember that the higher your porosity is with silver hair, the more susceptible your hair is to damage and yellowing. So that's one of the big reasons why I even discuss porosity at all. At this point, you may want to pause, grab a notebook, grab a pen, grab a cup of your favorite beverage, and come back, and then we'll get started. Let's get started with the hair cuticle. The hair cuticle is the outermost layer of your hair strand. This is a protective layer, and it looks a little bit like the shingles on a roof or a pine cone. A pine cone starts out closed and tight just like a healthy cuticle, but as it is exposed to the elements, weather, sun, and so forth, it will open up. A smooth pine cone represents a protected, well-hydrated, healthy, undamaged cuticle, while a fluffy and rough pine cone represents a cuticle that might be dry, damaged, and in need of moisture or repair. Most silver hair has a naturally slightly raised cuticle. The level of tightness of the cuticle determines its porosity. A nice, tight, closed cuticle is low porosity. A cuticle that is slightly open and a little bit rough is a medium porosity. A cuticle that is blown wide open, is rigid, has chips and cracks in it, or is frayed is considered a high porosity. There are basically 2 definitions of porosity. The primary and most common definition of porosity is how your hair absorbs and retains moisture. Usually porosity is referred to in low, medium, and high. The second definition of porosity, which is used by colorists, is defined in the American Board of Certified Hair Colorists Study Portfolio by Thea Spearing as, in hair coloring terms, when we speak of porosity, we are actually discussing the structural integrity of the hair, which means it is how damaged is the hair. This system is on a graded system from 1 to 5. 1 and 2 are considered low, 3 is considered medium, and 4 and 5 are considered high. 5 is considered extremely damaged, where your hair has probably been over-processed and bleached to the point of needing a really good haircut and to reset your hair by regrowing it out. Grade 1 is low porosity, and it is a compact, tight cuticle. Minimal to no chemical treatments or heat styling damage or environmental damage. Most likely this person's hair color is their natural hair color. The roots and the tips will likely match in hair color, and the elasticity is very good with very good resistance to wet combing without breaking. Grade 2 is slightly raised cuticle with a little bit of environmental damage, nothing too extreme. It may be 2 to 3 levels lighter than their natural color, and it has good elasticity. Grade 3 is a moderately raised cuticle with moderate exposure to the elements, heat, and chemical treatments. It may be up to 5 levels lighter than the person's natural hair color, and it is moderately resistant to combing and breakage. Grade 4 is an excessively raised cuticle. This is when we move into high porosity. Excessive exposure to the elements, heat, and chemical damage. It may be up to 7 levels lighter than the person's natural hair color, and it can be frizzy in appearance when it is dry, and it is susceptible to breakage when combing. Grade 5 is loss of cuticle layer, extreme exposure to chemical treatment to the point of breakage. Hair feels mushy or slimy when wet, maybe 8 or more stages lighter than natural hair color, no elasticity so it breaks off when it is combed. The root and the tips are not the same color. Using the grading system, grades 1 and 2 are low porosity. 3 is medium porosity. 4 and 5 is high porosity. 5 is extremely high porosity, and it is caused by extreme damage. So if you have your natural silver hair, it is very unlikely that you have level 5 or grade 5 porosity. What changes hair porosity? Length and age are the first thing that changes your hair porosity. The longer your hair is, the higher the porosity it is on the ends. Because, for instance, with the length of my hair, my ends are probably 5 years old, so the porosity goes up with age. The second thing that changes our porosity is extended exposure to the sun. So if you aren't using UV protection or covering your hair with a hat and you work outside a lot or you're in the sun a lot, you will be changing the porosity of your hair. Chemical processes, relaxers, bleach, dye, highlights, blowouts like the Brazilian blowout, all can affect the porosity of your hair. Heat styling with flat irons, curling irons, and hair dryers can affect the porosity of your hair. And finally, environmental exposures can cause the porosity of your hair to rise. Things like pollution, wind, winter climates, dry air, and so forth. As you can tell, there are several things that change the porosity of your hair. Once the damage is done to the cuticle, it cannot be reversed. It can be protected and you can grow that out, but once the damage is done, it's done. So you want to make sure that if this has happened, you continue to care for your hair to protect the cuticle, grow it out, and stop any processes like chemical processes or heat styling that is contributing to that damage and raising that porosity. Another thing to note about porosity is that it's variable. You can have different porosities on one head of hair. For instance, I have low porosity from about here up, and I have medium porosity from here down because of the length of my hair. You can also have different sections of your hair that have different porosities. Say you have a lower porosity in your white hair and a higher porosity in your dark hair. You can have also different porosities based on if you still have dye in your hair. If you are transitioning and you have the cold turkey grow out going on, you have lower porosity hair up here and higher porosity where it is dyed. If you have highlights, all of those highlighted pieces are in the 4 to 5 range of porosity, and the rest of your hair is lower than that. The key here, if that's going on for you, is to treat your hair for its highest porosity level, and that will help protect your lowest porosity level. How do you determine your hair porosity? The only way to determine your hair porosity 100% is via a lab under microscope. Since that is not an easily accessible solution to go to a lab, there are a few home tests. Some of them are very fallible, so let's go through those. First, let's start with the float test. I'm sure many of you have seen this little diagram where the hair is floating on the top of the water or midway through the water or sunk all the way to the bottom, and that's supposed to represent low, medium, and high. The problem is that you can have buildup on your hair, you can have conditioners in your hair, you can have leave-in, you can have damage to your hair that doesn't necessarily mean that your whole head meets that porosity. And if you don't break the surface tension on the top of the water, your hair, if it's fine, would float. So it's a very fallible test, and I don't recommend it because you can get mixed results even on one head of hair. It can make it even more confusing. The method that I used to figure out what my porosity was the fine mist spray test, and then I did have that confirmed with a lab. So you take a bottle like this that has the continuous sprayer on it that sprays a fine mist, and you spray it on your dry, clean, product-free hair. If the water beads up on your hair and then rolls off or takes a little bit to soak in, you likely have low porosity hair. If it takes a little bit to soak in, but it does soak in, then you have medium porosity hair. If the water soaks right in and disappears, then you have high porosity hair. The method that I use to determine someone's porosity when they call in for consultations is I ask them how long it takes their hair to get wet and how long it takes their hair to get dry. So on low porosity hair, like mine for instance, it can take up to a minute or more for water to soak into your hair. And then dry time can take upwards of 2 to 3 to 4 or more hours for your hair to dry. It takes my hair about 4 hours to air dry. If you have really high porosity hair, your hair will soak up water really rapidly. Some people notice that even between shampoo and conditioner, their hair can feel like it's starting to dry out already. You will find that your hair dries really rapidly. You may not even need heat styling like a diffuser or a blow dryer with any heat on it at all to dry your hair. That is a sure sign you have high porosity hair. If you have several porosities throughout your hair with the testing on how long it takes to dry, sometimes this might be a little confusing because, for instance, like with my hair, the ends are medium porosity, and often if I haven't gotten enough product on my ends, they will dry long before my roots do. So that's something to keep in mind. That will tell you if you do have variable porosities on your head. How does pH affect the porosity of your hair? pH is a measure of acidity, stomach acid, to alkalinity, drain cleaner. The natural pH of virgin hair is between 4.5 and 5.5, which is slightly acidic. Chemical processes will push that towards alkalinity because most chemicals like bleach are alkaline. A high pH substance will open the cuticle and a low pH substance will close the cuticle. So the idea behind understanding what pH does to porosity is it's simply a matter of knowing that sometimes you may need products that were designed to work together, all one line for instance, so that it is the shampoo, conditioner, leave-in, and gel, for instance, that were all created to go together. The reason you want to do this is because those products, ideally, the shampoo has a higher pH, the conditioner has a lower pH to match the natural pH of the hair. The leave-in is designed to stay in the hair and meet the natural pH of the hair and not be over it or below it so that it stays in balance. When the pH is imbalanced, this is where we end up with fairy knots and tangles and frizz. So that is why pH can become a valuable asset to learn about when you're dealing with your hair, especially if you're struggling with things like tangles, knots, and frizz. So pH altering substances that you can use to help your hair when you have low porosity hair would be like a baking soda. Baking soda can help open the cuticle and help cleanse the hair, and it will help create shine and manageability. Of course, you want to be very careful with that. You want to mix baking soda with an agent that kind of calms it down a little bit and brings the pH down just a little bit so you don't damage your hair. Acidic products like vitamin C and vinegar are not good for low porosity hair because they can tighten the cuticle down and cause low porosity hair to get dry, and that's not something you want to have happen. On high porosity hair, something like apple cider vinegar can be good for you because it can help close the cuticle and seal the hair and protect it from moisture loss. Finally, I want to talk about the virgin hair myth when it comes to porosity. It is widely stated out there that there is no such thing as naturally occurring high porosity hair. I even believed this for a while because I thought surely there's no possible way that your hair can naturally grow out of your head in a high porosity state. However, I have found with the people that I have worked with through consultations that this is absolutely not true. There are people with naturally gray hair that have no heat or chemical damage and their hair is a higher porosity. And remember that gray hair actually already has a slightly raised cuticle, so it can't be 100% virgin, and low on every head of hair, because some people are going to have coarse hair, they're going to have medium texture hair, they're going to have fine hair, and that is going to dictate how that cuticle is and whether or not it is closed tightly or opened a little bit. That's it for this video. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that it was something that helped you clear up some of the confusion out there about porosity, and I hope you're able to determine the porosity of your hair with the tests that I've given you. Stay tuned for my next porosity videos, which will be hair care tips on low, medium, and high. If you want first knowledge of those releases on those videos, I highly suggest that you sign up for my email list. There'll be a link in the description box below for you. While you're down there, like this video if you found it helpful. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you have any comments or questions about porosity, I will do a Q&A on porosity if necessary. I'll do a video on that later. So leave your comments in the comments below, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, shine on.